Welcome to part 9 of our series on building a Zelda-like game in Phaser 3. To make our game objects more flexible and modular, we'll continue to build out our component system. In this video, we'll explore how components help us extend functionality and keep our code organized. If you're new here, this is part of a full series where we create a Zelda-inspired game from scratch. Check out the playlist link in the description to start from the beginning. Let's get started and build out our component system. Now that we have our base states in place for our idle and movement, we're going to work on creating a few components for our animation, speed, and direction of our character game objects. So currently in our idle state, when we want to go to play one of our animations for idle, we have a to-do where we need to update this to handle our player's direction. So as an example, if I go right, our player should still face right and do our right idle animation after we let go of our input. In addition to this is we want our idle state to be reusable across our various characters, and right now we have a hard-coded animation tied to our player's animation keys. And instead, we want to add this to a component so then that way we can grab our animation keys from that component and play the various animations. And one other change we'll do is over in our move state, when we move our player and we normalize our velocity with our speed, we have a hard-coded value of 80 for our player's speed, and we want this to be configurable per character. And so by creating a component for that, we'll be able to support that. To start creating our new components, let's go into our source folder. Under our components folder, under game object, let's make a new file. We'll do SpeedComponent first. For this, I'm going to go into our controls component. I'm just going to copy all of our code. I'm going to paste it over here. So let's update our class name. So instead of controls component, we'll do our speed component. So now on our class, instead of having an input component, we'll have speed. This is going to be a number. Let's update our references. And for our getter, we'll do speed. And then we'll update our constructor. Let's update our imports. And so now to make use of our new components, jump over to our player class. We need to create a new instance of our component. So let's add a new property to our class. So we'll do SpeedComponent. After we create our controls, we'll do this. We'll do our speed component will be equal to our new speed component. We'll do this. And now we need to provide our speed. So let's do our 80 here. And then on our player class, we'll need a way to get our speed from our player. So let's add a new getter. So after our controls, let's do get. We'll do speed. We'll return our speed number. So now for our return value, we'll do this, our speed component, and we'll reference our speed property. So now instead of hard-coding our 80 here, we're going to move this to our configuration file. So then that way we have all of our configurations in one spot. So if we go into our config file, let's export our new const. We'll do export const. We'll do player speed. We're going to set that equal to 80. Come back to our player class. Now let's reference that new variable. We'll do speed. So we'll do player speed. All right, so we save. Let's go over to our move state and let's reference our new component. So let's get rid of our speed from here. And now let's do this. We'll do our game object and we'll grab our speed value from there. So now back in our scene, if we move our player around, we'll see our player still moves around at the same speed. If we jump over to our config file, let's bump this down to 40, and now our player should move, and it should be much slower. All right, so let's go ahead and revert that back to 80, and we'll save. Now for our player, let's create a component to keep track of our player's direction when they move around our game. So under our components game object folder, let's do a new file. Let's do DirectionComponent. Let's copy all the code from our speed component over to our direction component. We'll update our name, and so instead of speed component, we'll have direction component. For the property on our class, we'll do direction. And now for our type, we need to define a new direction type. So let's go into our common folder. Let's make a new file. We'll do common.ts. Let's do export const. We'll do direction. It's going to be equal to an object. And now we'll just have our 4 directions. So we'll have up, down, left, and right. For the values in our object, let's just match our keys. And then we'll do as const for our object. As now for our direction object, let's create a type to reference our values here. And so over in our types file, we'll do export type. We'll do direction, and this is going to be equal to our key of, type of, our direction. All right, then finally, we're going to add a utility function for validating if a string is actually one of our directions. So in our utils file, let's make a new function. We'll do export function. We're going to do isDirection. For this, we'll expect a string, so we'll have direction for our argument. It's going to be a string, and now for our type, we're going to do direction is direction. Then all we'll do in here is we'll just return. We'll make sure our direction object actually has this property from direction that was provided. If it doesn't equal undefined, Then we know that the string that was provided is one of our valid directions. For the time being, we won't use this function, but we'll need it later on in our code. So now with our new type, we come back to our direction component. Let's update our reference here. So from number, we'll do direction. It's now in our constructor. Let's get rid of our speed argument. And we'll just add a default value for our direction. And so we'll just default to the direction.down when we create an instance of our component. For our getter, we'll do get direction. This will return our direction type. Now let's add a setter for setting our direction. So I'm just going to copy this here. We'll paste it, get rid of our return type. And now for our argument, we'll do direction. We'll set our type to direction. And we'll do this.direction will be equal to the direction we provided. And we'll change it to be our setter. Now let's save. So now for our direction component. So for our direction component, one other change we're going to do is we're going to add in an argument for a callback for when our direction changes. So when our direction changes in our game, we'll be able to register a callback and then do different business logic when this happens. To keep track of that, let's add a new property to our class. We'll do callback. For our callback, we're going to receive one argument, and this will be the direction of what just changed. And we'll return void. Let's add in our argument, and so we'll do on direction callback. And we want this to be optional, and so we'll just default to an empty function that just returns undefined. So we'll add that to our property. So this.callback will be equal to our onDirection callback. And now when we do set direction, we'll call that callback. And then we'll provide our direction that was just set. So now that we have our new direction component, let's jump over to our player class. And we want to create an instance of our component. So after our speed component, let's do direction component. Let's create our instance. We'll do this.direction component is equal to a new direction component. We'll pass in our player. And now we're going to want to add some getters and setters so we can easily get that value. So after speed, let's do get direction. So I'm just going to copy this here. We'll do direction. This is going to return our direction. And so we'll reference our direction component, and we want to reference our direction property on it. We'll also add in a setter for setting this value. So I'm going to copy this. We'll go ahead and paste it. We'll do set direction. We'll have our value, which will be our type of direction. We won't return anything. And now we just want to update the direction on our component to be equal to that new value that was provided. Now that we have our new direction component on our player, we can update our movement state to use this when we move our player around our scene. So let's open up our move state file. And in our onUpdate method, when we're handling our player input, this is where we'll set our direction. To do this, we'll add a new method to our class. And so for this method, we're going to call this update direction. So for this method, we're going to expect one argument. We'll have direction. And we won't return anything from this method. And so we'll do this, our game object, our direction will be equal to the direction we provided. All right, so now we just need to update our code to use our new method. And so we'll come up to here where we update our velocity. And let's do this. We'll call our new method. We'll do update direction. We're going to do direction.up. When the up key is pressed, let's copy that. We'll do down when the down key is pressed. Now down here, when left is pressed, we'll press in our direction left. And now let's do right. So now if we save, let's jump over to our idle state. And before we update our idle animation here, all we're going to do is we're going to log out our player's direction when we stop, just to make sure our code's working. So we'll do this, our game object, we'll grab our direction, let's save. And so we'll see right when our scene refreshes, we log out down. Now if we head to the left, we'll see our player's directions left, right, and up. Nice. So last thing we need to do is now we just need to update our animations to use our direction when we want to play our various animations. To do that, we need to create our new animation component. That's it for this part of the series. If you found this helpful, be sure to hit the like button. It really helps out the channel. And if you're following along, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next video. If you have any questions or want to share your progress, drop a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. Alright, thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one.